this is a necessary consequence of a commitment that the UK government has made to having no hard border, and we should value that commitment, and we should value the Good Friday Agreement. For all the energy in the discussions with the European Union since November, they have been about the wrong question. It should not be about the backstop, it should be about the future of our relationship with the European Union. So our main objections to this agreement are the fact that it leaves this country less empowered than we are at the moment, that it leaves us poorer than we would be otherwise, and most of all, that there is no clarity on the future. The Prime Minister said so today. What is the answer to the car industry or the aerospace industry that says, what does the future hold for us? What is the answer to a young person that says, what will happen to my rights in the future? The Prime Minister answered it today by telling us, after 3 years, the answer is there will be a spectrum of different outcomes. That's the answer, a spectrum of different outcomes. That is not good enough. We've heard plenty about elites and the people in this debate, but there is nothing more elitist than driving through a withdrawal agreement while deliberately keeping from the people the true nature of the future relationship between the European Union and the United Kingdom after that happens. And that is precisely the strategy of the government. So let me say to ministers, if they lose the vote tonight, and we are in the position of looking at an extension of Article 50, let us not have a sterile debate about whether that's for 1 month or 2 months or a particular number of weeks. Let it be for a purpose. Let us recast this process so that we can level with the public about the choices that Brexit entails. Let us lay them out, all the pros and cons. We know the pros and cons of remaining. It is time that the choices and the trade-offs of leaving were laid out before the public. That is the opportunity of extending Article 50, not simply another few weeks of the same parliamentary merry-go-round.
Mr. Speaker, I think it's probably an understatement to say that we are not where we want to be today, and we are not where we should be. I do not believe that the 17.4 million people who voted to leave the EU expected that just 17 days before our scheduled leave date, whether or not we're going to leave on the 29th of March would still be in the balance. This House voted to trigger Article 50, which gave a 2-year notice period for us to leave, and it passed the EU Withdrawal Act, which had the date that we leave on the face of the bill. And it is a failure of our politics and a failure of leadership that we are in this position today, where the choice before us tonight is, as far as I'm concerned, an impossible choice. A choice between a deal which is not a deal and does not deliver on our promises to the people of this country, and voting down the deal and risking all sorts of alternatives from those who want to thwart, delay and prevent Brexit from ever happening. And I believe it will only be when the history books of this period of time are written and the real truth comes out that we will fully appreciate all those people who have sought to undermine the Prime Minister in her negotiations and the hindrance that that has caused that are directly responsible for why we are here today. Those who have maintained taking no deal off the table, that has completely undermined our negotiating position. Those who have supported a second referendum that has given the message to the EU, if you give the UK a terrible deal, they will vote it down in another referendum and decide to stay in the EU. And I believe that the truth will come out one day, exactly what has gone on that has undermined these negotiations. But we are where we are tonight. And I have to say, here we are 20 minutes before the vote, I still don't know how to vote. I am still in a quandary. Because the choices before us tonight are two wrongs. They are two things I do not want to happen. They are two impossible choices to make. I will make a decision and I will vote tonight. But I have to tell you, it is a choice I do not want to have to make between, and if you'll excuse my language, Mr. Speaker, a turd of a deal, which has now been taken away and polished and is now a polished turd, but it might be the best turd that we've got before us. or the alternative, which is those who want to stop Brexit altogether. And the risk of that happening is very real, and I believe it would be a complete denial of the people who we said, I can't take interventions, I'm afraid. When this House voted for a referendum, we put the decision in the hands of the people. We said, you will make this decision and we will implement it. And the fact that we are where we are today is a failure of our politics, and every one of us, I believe, needs to be responsible for the view that this place is held by the British public today. So as I am faced with the impossible choice tonight, Mr. Speaker, I just trust that we will commit, we will absolutely deliver on the referendum, we will commit to keep our word to this British people, and one way or another we will leave at the end of this month.
Mr Martin Whitfield.
For Mr Speaker, it's a pleasure to follow the honourable member for St Austell and Newquay, and can I suggest that he votes against the deal as a little piece of advice. We've listened to the debates over the last few months, and we can extract many anomalies that really have led to the heart of the constitutional problem that we found ourselves in today. There is a real risk that this Parliament is becoming a hollow Parliament, a Parliament that the Executive holds so low they will not dare open negotiations with it, a Parliament whose votes the Executive choose to follow or choose not to follow, a Parliament that some honourable and right honourable members have in the very recent past suggested be adjourned until after Brexit. A Parliament the Executive will not grant opposition days to for fear of being forced to follow the will of the people's elected representatives. A Parliament that the people look at and, like so many generations before, are starting to despair at. But I would warn the Executive that this Parliament will bite back. There is no majority for this identical deal. There is no majority for no deal. There's no majority to authorise this Executive to throw us over an economic cliff, to damage our culture, our communities, our future generations, to lose the respect this country is held in around the world, and to lose the respect this country holds for itself. If those that lead cannot see and act in the best interests of our country on the evidence that lies before us, not some historic prejudice, then do not be surprised if this chamber doesn't bite back. So here we are. We find ourselves with a meaningful vote in March. The Right Honourable Member for Loughborough made mention of the people's vote and said how it would risk to break democracy and our politics. But it's interesting that we do not hear of the fraud, of the investment, the attempts to buy the votes in that original referendum, and why that itself is not underpinning and damaging our democracy and our politics. It does beg the question, what intellectual humility is needed to say what the government is doing is wrong? What intellectual humility will it take to look at the facts that influence current thinking? I hope it is not history, because history will judge this folly severely. My predecessor had the pleasure of sitting for 6 hours to speak and vote when we went into the forerunner of the European Union. That organisation that we watched be created after World War II, not for trade, but to keep the peace. We have heard today from honourable members about the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, an agreement that is not about trade, but is about keeping the peace. It is about keeping communities living, working and enjoying each other's pleasure. I will vote against the deal tonight, not because of the Good Friday Agreement, not because of the economics that was said during the referendum, that we were going to be all so much better, but I'm going to vote against it because of the young people in East Lothian, whose futures are being damaged by this decision. There are people who stand up and say there are hard Brexiteers and there are hard Remainers, and the reality lies somewhere in the middle. Well, tonight, Mr. Speaker, I declare my interest as a hard Remainer. That's where I think the future of East Lothian is, that's where the future of Scotland, and that's where the future of the United Kingdom is best suited.
Keir Starmer!
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This has been a very important debate, and tonight's vote will be one of the most significant votes this House will ever take. And I want to thank all of those that have spoken in the debate today, and indeed all of those that spoke in the debate on previous occasions. And Mr. Speaker, as we go to vote, I also want to put on record my thanks to the civil service and the UK negotiating team. They are dedicated, committed, and have worked tirelessly for the past 2 years. They deserve our thanks. Too often they have received wholly unwanted criticism with no right of reply. The verdict that this House delivers on the deal is not a verdict on their efforts, but on the mistakes and political decisions taken by the government. And so I record my thanks, our thanks to them for the work that they have done. Mr. Speaker, the mood in the debate today has been lively at times, but also sombre. Members have clearly been contemplating what is likely to happen tonight. The theme has been clear and focused on what the Prime Minister said she could deliver, namely legally binding changes to the backstop. And as has been said many times in this debate, on the 12th of February, the Prime Minister outlined her 3 options for achieving those legally binding changes to the backstop. Either a legally binding time limit, or a legally binding unilateral exit clause, or thirdly, the ideas put forward by the Alternative Arrangements Working Group. Those commitments, those promises have been repeated many times by the Prime Minister and by other Cabinet Ministers, so much so, Mr. Speaker, that for many members of this House, not least members opposite, this has become a matter of trust. These were promises made by the Prime Minister to them, to Parliament, and to the country. I have repeatedly raised the question of expectations. I've repeatedly raised the concern that the Prime Minister was raising expectations that she could not fulfil. And when I said that last week and the week before, members opposite challenged me that I wasn't optimistic enough when I said I don't think there are going to be legally binding changes. It's now obvious that the expectations having been raised have not been fulfilled and the promises have not been kept. Amongst the problems for the Prime Minister and for the government has been that they've been living day to day, week to week, avoiding defeat today by promising something tomorrow. That's what happened on the 10th of December when the vote was pulled. Avoiding defeat, promising assurances on the backstop. It's what happened on the 29th of January when the government voted for the so-called Brady Amendment, requiring that the backstop be replaced. It happened on the 12th of February when that promise was made about legally binding changes. And it happened 2 weeks ago when, facing possible defeat on a crucial moment and motion 2 weeks ago, the promise was made that we'd have the meaningful vote today, a vote on no deal tomorrow, and a vote on extension the day after. They were all promises made to avoid defeat today, a promise for tomorrow. But as tonight's vote is likely to show, today has caught up with tomorrow. There can be no more buying time. I appreciate in the last 24 hours the Prime Minister has valiantly tried to argue that she's delivered on her promises, that there are significant changes. But that claim has been tested in argument in this House. There was always the right to suspend the backstop under the Withdrawal Act if the arbitration panel found a breach of bad faith, a temporary right to suspend. That was not new. It's been there since the 25th of November. There was always the commitment that the backstop would not have to be replicated. That was there from the 14th of January in the letter from Presidents Tusk and Juncker. And the announcement that the letter is legally binding was made last night, but the Prime Minister on the 14th of January made it clear that the letters had legal force back then for the first vote. Though legal force, legal binding, dancing on the head of a pin, but that's the difference. That's the only difference. That claim has been tested in this debate, and the Attorney General delivered his opinion earlier. The key conclusion of paragraph 19 of his advice being that there is no internationally lawful means of exiting the backstop save by the agreement. He could not have been clearer. The Attorney General made much play of the difference between political and legal issues, but the problem for the Prime Minister is that she promised legal changes. A Father of the House challenged the Leader of the Opposition on the question of the backstop, and rightly so, and I make it clear we've always accepted the need for a backstop. Nobody likes the backstop, but it is inevitable. But as the letter from President Tusk and President Juncker makes clear, the withdrawal agreement and political agreement are part of the same negotiated package. I will give way.
Very grateful, but he did refer to me. But what I put to the Leader of the Opposition was that the only things we're settling today with this vote is the deal we've got on citizens' rights, the money we owe, and the Irish backstop. And that's the only thing resolved if we pass this withdrawal agreement today. And I still can't understand what the objection of the Labour Party is to any of those three.
I engage with that point because it's an important point. I have actually dealt with it a number of times from this dispatch box. I've made it clear on a number of occasions that the Labour Party recognises the need for the backstop. The problem is this, and it's there in the heart of the letter from President Tusk and President Juncker, where they say the withdrawal agreement and the political declaration are part of the same negotiated package, and if anybody's read the legislation that we are voting under tonight, they will appreciate that the government cannot move forward unless both the withdrawal agreement and the political declaration together are voted on tonight. So it's a cheap point for people to simply say, well, since you accept there's a backstop, you should vote for this tonight, and I won't accept it. But Mr. Speaker, it's not just the technical fact that the withdrawal agreement and political declaration have to be voted through together. It's also the fact that what's happened today, and looking at the promises, is as much about trust as it is about substance. Now, I've never doubted the difficulty of the Prime Minister's task, or the way that she has gone around about the task that she's had. And she's been right to refuse to listen to those who are casual and complacent about the need to avoid a hard border in Northern Ireland. But the reality is that the deal the Prime Minister has put before this House is deeply flawed. The future relationship document is flimsy and vague. It's an option paper. It's the blindest of Brexit. Now, I heard what the Prime Minister said today, and she said it before, about not being able to negotiate a trade agreement with the EU until we have left, and that is, of course, right. But she knows, and I know, what she promised: a comprehensive and detailed political declaration ready to be implemented. That's why it was called an implementation period and not a transition period. And that was a commitment made at the dispatch box by Brexit secretaries on a number of occasions, a detailed political declaration. This deal is not that. It's an abject failure. It does not protect jobs, living standards or rights. It will not deliver frictionless trade. The deal has already been rejected once by this House. It's been rejected by the Scottish Parliament and the Welsh Assembly. It's opposed by the TUC and the entire trade union movement and every opposition party in the House, and I suspect a good many members opposite will oppose it tonight. This is a sorry outcome after 2 years of negotiations. I won't, because I've just looked at the clock. Mr. Speaker, I want to end with this. I've been in this role as Shadow Brexit Secretary for 2.5 years. It often feels longer. Many predictions were possible back then, but I could not possibly have foreseen the scale of the calamity now upon us. The truth is, the Prime Minister spent 24 months negotiating the deal, but the deal arrived at is a desperate attempt to keep her divided party together, and it's failed even in that endeavour. And I believe it will be rejected by this House. Now, this is a difficult moment for this House and for the country, and we in this House should take no joy in the events that have unfolded. But after tonight, the House will need to come together and find a way out of the mess that the Prime Minister and this government have created. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State for Brexit, Secretary Stephen Barclay.
Mr. Speaker, the Right Honourable and Learned Gentleman began his remarks by paying tribute to the officials across Whitehall who have put in so much work into the negotiations on which we vote tonight, and I join him on behalf of the government in paying tribute to that work. Mr. Speaker, 8 weeks ago, Parliament made clear that despite the benefits delivered by the deal must change. And the government has listened to the concerns of the House, and it has done so. It returns to present a revised package which my Right Honourable friend the Prime Minister, my Right Honourable friend and learned friend the Attorney General and I are putting to the House, which signals a moment in time when we can move forward and when the country can move forward. It delivers the certainty our businesses need, the guarantees our citizens seek, the protections requested across the House on workers' rights and environmental standards. And on Gibraltar, as the Chief Minister himself has said on many occasions, the Prime Minister has been absolutely clear that we stand behind British sovereignty for Gibraltar, and that will never change. Above all, a vote for the deal tonight will deliver a wider global message that when this country votes, respecting strongly held differences of opinion, its Parliament acts on that public vote. Mr. Speaker, in recent weeks, the Prime Minister and senior members of the government have engaged widely, from trade unionists like Len McCluskey, to businesses, to EU leaders, and to many colleagues across the House. Even, on one occasion, when he finally got round to it, with the leader of the opposition. Tonight, the government presents a package of measures which will extinguish the risk of no deal and remove the democratic threat posed by no Brexit. The fear of being trapped in the backstop, of the EU using its leverage in negotiations, has been repeatedly raised, Mr. Speaker, in previous debates. I do not believe the EU ever intended to approach our future relationship in bad faith. And indeed, it's a slight irony that those who say they are European suggest that the backstop and the EU acting in bad faith is a concern of theirs. It's certainly not my experience of dealing with them. We share values and we want to trade together. But we have acted to address that risk. Of course, I'll give way to my right honourable friend.
Very grateful to my right honourable friend for giving way on that point about us being stuck in the backstop. I understand the Attorney General, further to my question earlier, has been able to extend his advice on how Article 62 of the Vienna Convention could be used, and I wonder if my right honourable friend would be able to confirm that.
Well, I'm very happy to address the point that my honourable friend, the member for North East Somerset, raised. I was going to come on, just before I do, to the wider point that the Attorney General made clear in his comments this evening, that the documents laid before the House reduce the risk on which he previously gave advice to the House on the 13th of November. But I think the issue to which my honourable friend alights is the exceptional circumstances which might change the basis on which the UK might enter into an agreement. For the clarity of the House, if the United Kingdom took the reasonable view
on clear evidence that the objectives of the protocol were no longer being proportionately served by its provisions because, for example, it was not any longer protecting the 1998 agreement in all its dimensions, the UK would first obviously attempt to resolve the issue in the Joint Committee and within the negotiations. However, as the Attorney-General said in the House today, it could respectfully be argued, if the facts clearly warranted it, that there had been an unforeseen and fundamental change of circumstances affecting the essential basis of the treaty on which the United Kingdom's consent had been given. As my honourable friend will know, Article 62 of the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, which is reflective of the customary international law, permits the termination of a treaty in such circumstances. It would, in the government's view, be clear in those exceptional circumstances that international law provides the United Kingdom with the right to terminate with the agreement, the withdrawal agreement. In the unlikely event that were to happen, the United Kingdom would no doubt offer to continue to absorb the unexhausted obligations in connection, for example, with citizens' rights. I hope that addresses the concern that was raised. Of course I do.
Is the Attorney-General going to issue an addendum to the statement and the opinion he's already given? Or is this just the Honourable Gentleman's view on the matter?
Whoa! Well, firstly, I've, at the dispatch box, set out the position on behalf of the government and given that clarity ahead of the vote. I think what was clear in response to the Attorney's statement earlier today, that he has been assiduous in his duties to this House. He has provided his legal advice both on the 13th of November and today, and I am sure that the Attorney will continue to be a servant of the House, Mr. Speaker, and answer in that way. I simply have 3 minutes remaining, Mr. Speaker. It is. I will.
Order! The House must calm itself. It's up to the Right Honourable Gentleman to decide whether, and if so to whom, he wishes to give way. The matter for the Right Honourable Gentleman. Secretary of State.
Well, of course, I will reflect the will of the House and give way. But what is interesting is the view from the benches opposite is not a desire to get into the substance, but just to play politics with what is one of the most crucial decisions in our country's history. I'll give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
I'm most grateful to my Right Honourable friend. I just want to understand the implications of Article 62, because it seems to me that what he's actually saying is that that would be a ground for voiding the entire treaty. But that's a rather different thing from being able to pull out of the backstop. Doubtless, there might be some members of this House who'd be only too delighted to see the entire treaty voided, but it is a rather apocalyptic scenario, or have I misunderstood something?
No, well, rather like economists, lawyers can always find issues on which to disagree. But the issue here is, as I said in my remarks, we are dealing here with unlikely circumstances, and what came through the Attorney's statement was the fact that ultimately this is a political judgment, not a legal judgment. It is for members of this House to assess the political risk. Indeed, as the Attorney himself said, I've had one intervention.
Order. One sentence of no more than 10 words. Spit it out.
Is the Attorney-General going to add to the opinion he's already given? What the Honourable Gentleman saying is really strict.
The Secretary of State has already explained that he's speaking for the government. Colleagues must make their own assessment. There is no time to delay. Right Honourable Gentleman.
So, well, given I have but 1 minute left, what came through, Mr. Speaker, in the statement this morning is, if I can quote the Attorney, legal advice can only inform a political decision. And tonight the House faces a political decision. We have a strong message from our business community that wants certainty. We have a message from our citizens who want to know their rights are protected. We are a country that stands by its legal obligations, which is why we will settle the financial settlement. But the reality, Mr. Speaker, that we face a fork in the road. It is time to choose. It is time to support this deal. It's time for our country to move forward. I commend the motion to the House.
Order. The question is motion number 3 as on the order paper. As many as have that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. Division! Clear the lobby. Order. The question is motion number 3 as on the order paper. As many as have that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. No. Aye. Yes, okay. Well, the shout fest has been successfully concluded. Tell us for the ayes, Mr. Andrew Stevenson and Mr. Ian Stewart. Tell us for the noes, Thangham Debonair and Nick Dakin. Lock the doors! investigate the delay in the lobbies on the assumption that he can get anywhere near them. Order! Order!
The ayes to the right, 242. The noes to the left, 391.
The ayes to the right, 242. The noes to the left, 391. So the noes have it, the noes have it. Unlock! Order. Point of order, the Prime Minister.
On a point of order, Mr. Speaker, I profoundly regret the decision that this House has taken tonight. I continue to believe that by far the best outcome is that the United Kingdom leaves the European Union in an orderly fashion with a deal. And that the deal we've negotiated is the best and indeed the only deal available. But, Mr. Speaker, I would like to set out briefly how the government means to proceed. 2 weeks ago, I made a series of commitments from this dispatch box regarding the steps we would take in the event that this House rejected the deal on offer. I stand by those commitments in full. Therefore, tonight we will table a motion for debate tomorrow to test whether the House supports leaving the European Union without a deal on the 29th of March. The Leader of the House will shortly make an emergency business statement confirming the change to tomorrow's business. This is an issue of grave importance for the future of our country. Just like the referendum, there are strongly held and equally legitimate views on both sides. For that reason, I can confirm that this will be a free vote on this side of the House. I have personally struggled with this choice, as I'm sure many other honourable members will. I'm passionate about delivering the result of the referendum, but I equally passionately believe that the best way to do that is to leave in an orderly way with a deal. And I still believe that there is a majority in the House for that course of action. And I'm conscious also of my duties as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and of the potential damage to the Union that leaving without a deal could do when one part of our country is without devolved governance. I can therefore confirm that the motion will read that this House declines to approve leaving the European Union without a withdrawal agreement and a framework on the future relationship on the 29th of March 2019, and notes that leaving without a deal remains the default in UK and EU law unless this House and the EU ratify an agreement. I will return to the House to open the debate tomorrow and to take interventions from honourable members, and to ensure the House is fully informed in making this historic decision. The Government will tomorrow publish information on essential policies which would need to be put in place if we were to leave without a deal. These will cover our approach to tariffs and the Northern Ireland border, among other matters. If the House votes to leave without a deal on the 29th of March, it will be the policy of the Government to implement that decision. If the House declines to approve leaving without a deal on the 29th of March, The Government will, following that vote, bring forward a motion on Thursday on whether Parliament wants to seek an extension to Article 50. If the House votes for an extension, the Government will seek to agree that extension with the EU and bring forward the necessary legislation to change the exit date commensurate with that extension. But let me be clear. Voting against leaving without a deal and for an extension does not solve the problems we face. The EU will want to know what use we mean to make of such an extension. And this House will have to answer that question. Does it wish to revoke Article 50? Does it want to hold a second referendum? Or does it want to leave with a deal but not this deal? These are unenviable choices. But thanks to the decision that the House has made this evening, they are choices that must now be faced.
Point of order, Mr. Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Government has been defeated again by an enormous majority, and they must now accept their deal, their proposal, the one the Prime Minister has put, is clearly dead and does not have the support of this House. And quite clearly, no deal must be taken off the table. We've said that before, and we'll say that again. But it does mean the House has got to come together with a proposal that could be negotiated. The Labour Party has put that proposal, and we will put that proposal again, because the dangers of what the Prime Minister is proposing are basically that she carries on threatening us all with the danger of no deal, the danger of that, knowing full well the damage that will do to the British economy. This party will put forward our proposals again, which are about a negotiated customs union, access to the market and protection of rights. Those are the ones we'll put forward. We believe there may well be a majority for them, but there will also be the potential of negotiating them. The Prime Minister has run down the clock, and the clock has been run out on her. Maybe it's time instead we had a general election and the people could choose who their government should be.
Point of order. Point of order, Mr. Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a humiliating defeat for the government this evening, and this deal should not come back in any way, shape, form again. Mr. Speaker, people will once again be looking on at this Parliament and at this government in despair. The next few days are the opportunity finally to take some essential steps. Tomorrow, we have the opportunity to vote to block any attempt to leave the EU without a deal. And the Prime Minister must act as Prime Minister, not as the Tory party leader, and bring her party into line, stop the UK being dragged off a cliff and vote against a no-deal Brexit. As Prime Minister, it is the duty of the government to act in all our national interests, and that means ruling out no deal. And then we in the Scottish National Party will be prepared to engage in discussion with the government on securing an extension to Article 50 that is long enough to enable the issue to be put back to the people. This afternoon, the First Minister of Scotland told the Prime Minister that in the event that the deal was voted down again, we would engage constructively on sensible proposals. These proposals must include another EU referendum. Mr. Speaker, can you advise on what options are open to the House to bring these proposals forward swiftly in the interests of time? We have a responsibility to end the uncertainty for all our constituents and all our businesses.
Right honourable gentleman for his point of order, which I think was probably directed at a wider audience, but insofar as the right honourable gentleman asks me for advice, what I would say to him is I think that these matters can be explored in debate almost imminently. The Prime Minister has kindly announced what is to follow, and that will be elaborated upon by the Leader of the House in the supplementary or emergency business statement. The right honourable gentleman is well familiar with the opportunities that are available to him in the table office, and I have every expectation that colleagues who want to air propositions in the coming days will have the opportunity to do so. I don't think it is necessary for me to say anything further than that, but that seems to me to be manifest. Let's leave it there for now. Yes, I will come to the Right Honourable Lady, who may well have important matters to broach, not far distant from what the Right Honourable Gentleman has just raised. But let's just take the Leader of the Liberal Democrats. Point of order, Sir Vincent Cable.
With your vast knowledge of parliamentary precedent and history, can you identify a single case, say since the American War of Independence, in which a Prime Minister has twice been defeated and continues with the same policy?
Well, the government backbenchers very unkindly spoiled the Right Honourable Gentleman's punchline, as a consequence of which I didn't hear it.
I asked for a precedent where a Prime Minister had survived...
Order, Mr. Ennis, calm yourself, young man. I want to hear what the Leader of the Liberal Democrat Party has to say. Order!
Humiliating defeats, and was not willing to change policy. Since these benches and others are willing to offer an olive branch to embrace policies she's so far rejected, will she accept the offer of friendship to do so?
Well, I think that remains to be seen. As to the matter of precedence, it is usually unwise to assert that there is none for a particular circumstance unless you are absolutely certain, because most things have happened at one time or another, quite probably in my lifetime, and certainly in that of the Right Honourable Gentleman. Point of order, Yvette Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Businesses and public services and families urgently need some clarification about what will happen in just over 2 weeks' time. The reason that we had provided for the votes over the next couple of days was to ensure that there could be a clear vote in this House on no deal and a clear vote in this House on extending Article 50. The Prime Minister's proposal for a motion for tomorrow sounded unclear to me. Can he therefore confirm that that motion will be laid in sufficient time for MPs to be able to have time to table an amendment if necessary, to ensure that that vote can be clear-cut and there can be no misunderstanding or misinterpretation? And can you also confirm that if it is passed, that vote will go ahead on Thursday on the extending Article 50 and there will not be a new proposal instead to wait for the government to attempt to put its deal back a third time, given how comprehensively it was defeated tonight?
To the Right Honourable Lady for her point of order, and I will bring forward what I would have said after the business statement by the Leader of the House, and say it now instead in light of the concern that she's raised. To be fair, I thought that the Prime Minister's commitment about what would take place tomorrow and Thursday was clear. It was clear to me, but as to the detail of the motion, that's another matter. But in terms of the chronology of events, it was all very clear. But let me just say this. I hope it will be helpful to the House if I indicate, as I did in respect of today's proceedings when I addressed the House last night, if I indicate an advisory cut-off time of 10:30 on Wednesday morning for manuscript amendments to tomorrow's motion. My strong expectation, and I think I heard it, is that the motion for tomorrow, in accordance with normal practice, will be tabled tonight before the close of business, and there should be an opportunity for manuscript amendments up to 10:30 tomorrow. Amendments that reach the table office before the rise of the House tonight will appear, colleagues, on the order paper in the usual way. as those that were tabled last night before the close of business appeared on the order paper today in the usual way. The Table Office, whom, by the way, we thank for their prodigious endeavours at this difficult time, will arrange publication and distribution of a consolidated amendment list as soon as possible after 10:30 a.m. on Wednesday, including all the manuscript amendments. I will announce my selection of amendments in the usual way at the beginning of the debate. I hope that that is helpful both to the Right Honourable Lady and indeed, for that matter, to all colleagues. Yes, of course. Yeah, well, these are important matters, and although the Right Honourable Gentleman is a self-effacing fellow, he's an important man. Point of order, Hilary Benn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Further to the announcement you have just made about manuscript amendments for the motion that we will debate tomorrow, depending on the outcome of that vote, we will then come, as the Prime Minister has just made clear, to a motion on Thursday about seeking an extension to Article 50. Could you please clarify, depending on what time that motion is tabled tomorrow, which clearly can't be until we voted to reject leaving with no deal, what arrangements you intend to apply for Thursday to allow for manuscript amendments in the way that you have just set out for Wednesday?
The hours will be different because we start earlier on a Thursday, but I will apply the same logic and, I hope, sense of reasonableness and desire to accommodate colleagues. So I haven't come to a particular view about the precise deadline for Thursday now. It's something I'm happy to discuss with the Right Honourable Gentleman and other colleagues privately if they so wish, but I will have the same consideration in mind. The House's interest must be served, and I should seek to facilitate what members want. I hope that's helpful. Yes, a point of order, Mr. Angus Brendan McNeill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As Chair of the International Trade Committee, it's quite clear that Brexit now seems to be a busted flush, but it leaves us all in a very serious situation indeed. And the one option the Prime Minister didn't mention, which is mentioned to us in private before, is surely the government must now move quickly to revoke Article 50, as it's only 17 days or face self-inflicted economic damage and calamity to all our traders and all our businesses. Surely the way to leave with a deal is to maintain the deal the UK has currently got and revoke Article 50. Can we see that before the House, Mr. Speaker, as an option for MPs to vote on in the 17 days of seriousness we have in front of us now?
Well, the Honourable Gentleman chairs an important select committee in this place, the International Trade Select Committee. His brow was furrowed. He had a look of great seriousness, and I thought he was going to make a purely procedural point. But it is a partly procedural point, but it's also, if I may say so, a political point, to which the answer is that there will be an opportunity for an amendment to be tabled to any motion on the prospective extension of Article 50. So the opportunity is there for colleagues, and if an amendment is tabled and garners significant support, that would be a factor in the mind of the Chair in deciding whether to select it or not. But it is open to him to table such an amendment, and I've got a feeling that he will go beetling around the House in hot pursuit of colleagues who share his views on this matter. Point of order, Liz Saville-Roberts.
Thank you, Lawrence. I would note that the Prime Minister listed revocation, a different deal, or people's vote. I would seek his advice on how this House will ascertain those choices.
Yes, I think forgive me, I think the Honourable Lady has foxed me. Is the Honourable Lady seeking... I do apologise to the Honourable Lady, because I'm sure her point is an extremely good and clear one, but it wasn't clear to me immediately. Would she just put that question to me again? I'm not quite sure what she's seeking.
We have been presented with three options by the Prime Minister: revocation, a different deal, or people's vote. What I seek is clarity on how this House, which is being seen outside to be very good at disagreeing, will actually arrive at agreement on one of these points.
The answer is there are terms of debate, I say to the Honourable Lady, for tomorrow and for Thursday. That isn't necessarily the end of the debate. In fact, I think I can say with almost complete certainty that it won't be the end of the debates on these matters. It will by the end of Thursday. I see the Chancellor chuckling, I think, in agreement with that proposition. It will be the end of Thursday's debates and no more than that. So the answer to the Honourable Lady is that if members wish to test the will of the House on a variety of different options, there will be such an opportunity. This is a point that has been flagged up by the Father of the House, by the Honourable Lady for Bishop Auckland and others. If it is the will of colleagues that there should be such a series of votes, I think it almost certain that that opportunity will arise in the coming days or weeks. If there are no further points of order, I think we can now conveniently come to the business statement by the Leader of the House, Andrea Leadsom.
Mr. Speaker, with the leave of the House and further to my right honourable friend the Prime Minister's announcement, I should like to make a short business statement regarding the business for tomorrow and the remainder of this week. Wednesday the 13th of March, my right honourable friend the Chancellor will make his spring statement, followed by a debate on a motion relating to the UK's withdrawal from the European Union without a withdrawal agreement and a framework for the future relationship. Thursday the 14th of March, debate on a motion relating to the NICE appraisal process for treatments for rare diseases. The subject for this debate was determined by the Backbench Business Committee. Friday the 15th of March, we will sit for private members' bills. I will make a short business statement on Wednesday, should it be necessary, and I shall make a further business statement in the usual way on Thursday.
Thank you. Valerie Vaz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I thank the Leader of the House, but quite frankly, Mr. Speaker, I'm utterly astonished at this business statement. We still have no idea, despite the Prime Minister setting out what the next steps. We've had a vote, and now, as the Prime Minister herself said, we're now into an emergency business statement. Mr. Speaker, this is callous and incompetence from the government and a discourtesy to the House and a discourtesy to the country.
I think what the Leader is saying is that there would be a further business statement tomorrow. Presumably, the Right Honourable Lady means after tomorrow's debate and vote. Well, those points have been put on the record. I note what the Shadow Leader has said, and I'm happy to hear other points of order at this stage. Yes, indeed, I will come. Very well. Point of order, Mr. Peterbone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could the Leader of the House tell us whether there will be protected time for the debate tomorrow, considering that there is going to be an important statement first?
Forgive me, I want to facilitate the House. I think that's more... let's continue the exchanges on the business statement. That's really an inquiry, I think, for the benefit of the Leader, to which she can respond. The Leader.
The motion will be brought forward in the usual way, and it will be for the House to agree.
Thank you. Pete Wishart.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I thank the House for that very brief business statement. There was no question whatsoever. There was no question whatsoever that the government could possibly renege on the Prime Minister's commitment to have these consecutive votes, so we very much welcome that. I was a bit more concerned about what the Prime Minister said about the motion tomorrow. There did seem to be just that little bit of wriggle room, just a little bit that I detected, that the government would still hope to proceed with a no-deal Brexit in the event of this House voting to stop it. Now, I need to hear from the Leader of the House tonight that they will bring forward legislation in good time for no deal to be taken off the table, and there will be no question whatsoever if this is what the House decides, this is what the House will get. And this is what happened too often, Mr. Speaker, where we've had these debates, we've had these votes, just for this government to casually ignore it. Now, it's said tomorrow that will be a free vote. Again, I hope that will be extended to the vote on Article 50. We need to have protected time so that this could be properly considered by the House. No question whatsoever of the two votes being bundled into one, which was rumoured today. So can we have these rock-solid commitments? Because today, Mr. Speaker, this has been an absolute disaster. The chaotic cluelessness of this government's Brexit has been played out to the very, very end of these proceedings. We now need to get through the next 17 days with as much order, with as much respect to this House as possible, and that means respecting decisions. Will the Leader of the House do that in the next 2 days?
Leader of the House.
Well, what I can say to the honourable gentleman is really just to repeat what my right honourable friend the Prime Minister said, which is that if the House votes to leave without a deal on the 29th of March, it will be the policy of the government to implement that decision. If the House declines to approve leaving without a deal on the 29th of March, the government will, following that vote, bring forward a motion on Thursday on whether Parliament wants to seek an extension to Article 50.
Thank you. I can just inform the House, if this is helpful, that I understand that the government's motion for tomorrow's debate has now been tabled. And colleagues thinking of tabling amendments or simply wanting to study the motion in the table office have the opportunity, if they wish, to do so. Tom Brake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think for the benefit of everyone in this chamber, it really would be extremely helpful if the Leader of the House would in fact confirm whether there is protected time available for this debate. We do not want it scrunched into a very, very short period of time. There may be urgent questions, there may be statements, and we may be left with perhaps a matter of minutes. What we don't want is a repeat, for instance, of last night, where we have a minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, coming to make a key statement at 10 o'clock at night, and we are then left with very little time before the following morning to assess the implications. So can we have a guarantee that protected time will be available? It's not an unreasonable demand. It is.
Well, as the honourable gentleman will know, a motion of this House is amendable, and it is for the House to agree the timetable for tomorrow's discussion.
Yvette Cooper.
Given that a meaningful vote has been defeated tonight, can the Minister confirm that that means that a motion will be tabled by the Government under Section 13(4) of the Withdrawal Act? And when will that motion be tabled? Can she confirm that that will be tabled next week and before the European Council?
What I can say to the Right Honourable Lady is that the Government will ensure its commitments under Section 13 of the European Union Withdrawal Act of 2018 and the order of the 4th of December are met.
Point of order. Angela Regal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Leader of the House has chosen to have an emergency business statement merely about tomorrow's business, when we know there are sequential changes to Thursday's business as well. And she hasn't made it quite clear, and I hope she'll be able to do so this evening, to the House, that if we should vote to take no deal off the agenda tomorrow in this motion, that there will be a change to the legislation, which obviously we know is not superseded by a motion this House has passed. We'd have to change the legislation which has the leaving date of 29th of March in it. Will she now take this opportunity to reassure all of us by getting to the dispatch box and telling us that if we vote to take no deal off the table tomorrow, she will immediately facilitate a change to legislation to ensure that that happens?
What I can say to the Honourable Lady is that if the House declines to approve leaving without a deal on the 29th of March, the Government will, following that vote, bring forward a motion on Thursday on whether Parliament wants to seek an extension to Article 50.
Well, that may not be, and I appreciate that's not the answer the Right Honourable Lady wants, but it's the answer she's getting tonight. But these matters, and I understand entirely where she's coming from, can all be explored in the days ahead, and I'm absolutely certain that they will be. Chris Bryant.
I guess that if the Government has tabled the main motion, they've also tabled the business of the House motion governing tomorrow. So I don't understand why the Leader of the House can't just tell us what time the votes will be tomorrow. I mean, it will be for the convenience of members who have families and so on, because we're substantially changing the business for one of the most important matters affecting the House. If we just knew, is it going to be at 7 o'clock tomorrow evening? And Thursday, is it going to be at 5 or at 7?
These are matters for the House to agree.
Right, but I mean, I think the answer is, as I understand it at the moment, the motion, the Business of the House motion, I think, is proposing a 7 o'clock finish. I think it's a 7 o'clock finish is proposed, though, as the leader says, that is an amendable proposition. And if colleagues want to propose amendments to that, they can. This is Ellen Goodman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Surely, if the House votes against no deal tomorrow and for an extension, the simple and straightforward way for the government to facilitate this under the EU Withdrawal Act is to bring forward a statutory instrument, which is something it could do in 24 hours.
Yeah. Well, as my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, said, I think 2 weeks ago now, if the House votes for an extension, she will seek to agree that extension approved by the House with the EU and will bring forward the necessary legislation to change the exit date commensurate with that extension. But as my right honourable friend also said this evening, it is not within her gift, it's not within this government's gift to insist upon an extension. That will be a matter for agreement with the European Union and potentially subject to conditions imposed by them. But it would come back to this House, finally, to Parliament, and would need to be approved by Parliament.
Kirsty Blackman.
Mr. Speaker, given that we are just over a fortnight away from Brexit Day and the Prime Minister's deal has again been resoundingly rejected by this House, it is absolutely necessary that the spring statement tomorrow is upgraded to an emergency budget. Will the Leader of the House ensure that that happens?
Well, I've already announced the business for tomorrow, and my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, will continue as planned with his spring statement.
Can
I ask the Leader of the House, if no deal is passed tomorrow and we have a government motion on an extension to Article 50 on Thursday, will the government motion include anything about the length of time that the government expects that extension to Article 50 to be?
Well, I don't want to get into hypotheticals. At the moment, we have set out the debate for tomorrow, and the Prime Minister has been clear that should the House decline to leave the European Union without a withdrawal agreement and future political declaration, then we will table a further motion that invites the House to consider if it wants to extend Article 50. That will be an amendable motion, so it will be for the House to agree the length of such an extension, but that would only be tabled tomorrow should that be necessary.
Mistreating.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This evening's defeat was entirely foreseeable and foreseen. And yet, in spite of this, the Leader of the House is standing at the dispatch box. She wouldn't tell us what the limits were on the time limit for the debate tomorrow. She still won't tell us what the proposed wording for a motion on Thursday would be, or the conditions for the debate. And I'm afraid it's no good talking about hypotheticals, because this is the story of Brexit all along. Poor planning, poor preparation, and treating Parliament with contempt. Absolutely. I think the Leader of the House owes it to every member of the House, so we can consider these things properly, to stand up and tell us what the motion will be on Thursday, so that people can think about amendments they want to table. That is within her gift. She's right that it's the House that decides, but the government has to come up with a proposition, and there is no reason why she shouldn't offer that proposition now.
Well, can I say to the honourable gentleman that I always treat the House with the utmost respect, and I have tried very hard to explain that these propositions for tomorrow, and then if tomorrow the House declines to leave the European Union without the withdrawal agreement and future declaration, then and only then will we table a motion for the following day where the House can consider whether it wants to extend Article 50. These are sequential, these are not a package that the House is voting on together. I can confirm to the honourable gentleman that the motion for tomorrow has been tabled and that the motion of the House proposes that votes take place at 7 p.m. But it is a fact, it's not in any sense controversial to say that these matters must be agreed by the House. These motions are amendable and therefore can be amended and voted on by members.
Thank you. Stuart Malcolm MacDonald.
Mr. Speaker, following the points from the Honourable Member for Gedling and Ilford, she knows, I know, and the dogs in the street know that there is no majority to leave the European Union without a deal. That's what's going to happen tomorrow. So is there a reason why she can't tell the House, if not give it the full motion, is there a reason why she can't tell the House what the extension on offer from the government will be? Surely she can see that, one, that is in her gift, and it doesn't look good that she is keeping that to herself and not being open with the House this evening. But two, it would actually help the substance of tomorrow's debate, depending exactly on which way the government wants it to go. So why can't she be open, upfront and honest at that dispatch box? Tell us what the extension on offer might be.
Well, I would say to the honourable gentleman, I am always upright and honest and open with the House. And the fact is that should the House decline to leave the European Union without a future declaration and a withdrawal agreement, then and only then will I come forward with a motion for the following day, which will be amendable. It will be for the House to determine what the proposed extension period should be.
Yeah, I don't know whether the Honourable Gentleman is genuinely indignant or flummoxed. I hope he's neither, or he certainly seems to be the former. But to be fair, the leader has repeatedly said that if such a motion, trying to witter away to no obvious benefit or purpose from a sedentary position when I'm trying to assist the Honourable Gentleman, the government would table a motion on Thursday on that matter, which would be amendable. And as I indicated several minutes ago in response to the Right Honourable Gentleman member for Leeds Central, who inquired about what my thinking would be in respect of amendments on Thursday, I said I would apply the same logic as I shall apply to tomorrow's deliberations. So there will be ample opportunity for people to put forward amendments, but what are in effect their own propositions for an extension. Yes, their own ideas of what that time should be. So the Honourable Gentleman, I assure him, will not be disadvantaged. He will not be disadvantaged. Sorry? Well, okay, I've been trying to be helpful. Yes, indeed. Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can my right honourable friend confirm that if we get to Thursday and this House is asked to apply to the European Union for an agreement on extending Article 50, that the extension of time has to be in agreement with the European Union, and we can't decide that unilaterally?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely correct. The date of our exit is set out in law. Further legislation would be required to change it. The consent of the House will be required for any extension, including the length of that extension, and, of course, very importantly, the consent of the EU remaining 27 member states would also be required.
Maria Eagle.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the House said in answer to an earlier question that she always seeks to assist the House. And I wonder if she recalls, it's difficult at present with all the drama going on, and she's in the government, there's a lot of drama going on in the government, that she is the champion of the backbenchers in this place in the government. So can she use her best endeavours to make sure that the government, no matter what chaos is going on within it at present, does bear in mind the fact that we in this House need to understand and see the nature of the motions that are being promised as soon as possible in order to facilitate the will of this House in deciding the way forward?
Well, I take the Right Honourable Lady's suggestion in the spirit in which she intended it, and I absolutely take my responsibilities as Parliament's voice in government very seriously, and I will most certainly take her suggestions back to the business managers.
Alan Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're in this mess for a variety of reasons, but chiefly because the government triggered Article 50, had no coherent plans. The Prime Minister blinkerly carried on full steam with her red lines and thought she could run down the clock. Yep. So here we are, the clock is nearly run down. Parliament's rejected the deal yet again, and tomorrow we've got a motion where I notice the government's trying to do but remember, the clock's still ticking and the default is to leave on March the 29th. So at what point is the government, further to earlier points, at what point is the government going to start doing strategic thinking, be open with the House, let us see what the plans are, and actually look ahead instead of keep trying to do this one day at a time, run down the clock?
Well, the honourable gentleman will know that there has been a very steady desire on the part of the government to seek agreement to the withdrawal agreement and future political declaration, and to seek changes, legally binding changes, that would enable parliamentarians to support it. The Prime Minister indicated her extreme sadness at the fact that the House has declined to support the deal, and she set out 2 weeks ago the next step should that be the case. So we are following the process that the Prime Minister set out a couple of weeks ago now, and it is still our intention, if at all possible, to leave the European Union on March the 29th with a good deal.
Yes, Meg Hillier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Further to the point of order by my honourable friend, will the government lay out on Thursday, alongside the motion, the considerations it's taken into what will, no doubt will propose a period of extension of its own, which obviously can be amended? Through the work of the Public Accounts Committee, we see the real challenges of being prepared even with a deal by the 29th of March. Even a short extension gives little comfort to people out there. So will she give us either now or then an indication of the length of time the government would be proposing for an extension to Article 50 on Thursday?
Well, the government will always endeavour to table motions swiftly so that parliamentarians have sight of them. As I've said to a number of honourable members, the motion tomorrow is about whether the House wishes to leave without a withdrawal agreement and political declaration on March the 29th. And tomorrow evening, should the House decline to leave without a deal, I will be then tabling a motion that sets out the government's proposal. But as I've said to honourable members, that will be amendable, so it will be for all members to consider whether they prefer a different sort of extension. But very importantly again, it will then be for the EU unanimously to agree to that extension proposal. And to be very clear about that, there may well be conditions imposed that this House would not wish to accept, and we need to all be open-eyed about that fact.
Lloyd Russell-Moyle.
Forgive me if I stress this point again, but this is a government, of course, that has been found in contempt of Parliament, and when the Leader of the House is not fully clear on what the consequence of...
So what now?
Government's proposal. If they're unable to provide proposals, maybe they're unfit to be in government.
Well, I think, as I have said now a number of times, we have come forward with the proposal that the Prime Minister set out 2 weeks ago, that in the event the meaningful vote is declined today, we will set out tomorrow a motion enabling the House to decline to leave the European Union without a deal and without a future political declaration, and should the House decline to leave the EU without a deal, then the following day we will bring forward a motion asking the House if it wishes to have a short extension. That is the process that the Prime Minister set out, and that is what we will be doing.
Gareth Snell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. If the House were on Thursday to determine an extension past the 26th of May, according to the letters exchanged between Mr Juncker and Michel Barnier, then there would have to be participation in the European elections, which I, for one, would not support. If the House were to choose that, could the Leader of the House say whether there's been any funding contingency put in place? Because that is a large cost to the public purse for elections that, frankly, I don't think we should be participating in.
Well, I think the honourable gentleman makes a very good point. As the Prime Minister has said on numerous occasions, the only way to truly take no deal off the table is to agree a deal or to revoke Article 50. The House has consistently rejected the former, and the latter would overturn the result of the referendum. If the House, however, does vote for an extension, the Prime Minister will seek to agree the extension that the House has requested with the European Union, and would then bring forward the necessary legislation to change the exit date, commensurate with that extension. But he's exactly right, that may have significant costs associated with it, and potentially other conditions that are put upon it by other members of the European Union. These are all absolute imponderables as we stand here today.
Neil Gray.
Mr. Speaker, the government has just taken another pasting on its deal, and instead of coming forward with proposals as to how to mitigate the risks we face, the Leader of the House is ramping up the jeopardy by saying that if the House accepts tomorrow that no deal is the way forward, that will become government policy, when the reverse should be the case, Mr. Speaker, as well, that if the House votes against no deal, then she should be coming forward with legislation to ensure that that is ruled out. Why has she steadfastly refused to make that the government's position tonight?
Well, if the honourable gentleman thinks about it logically, the only way to take no deal off the table is either to revoke Article 50 or to agree a deal that changes the outcome. So what the Prime Minister set out is that we will come back to the House to see whether the House wants to extend Article 50. It is not our policy to revoke Article 50.
David Linden.
Mr. Speaker, having spent some time in the No Lobby tonight, which was even busier than usual, you will recall that during the division you yourself had to ask the sergeant to check the lobbies, and the place was very packed. Given that tomorrow we will have another vote of significance, and probably a vast majority of members will vote to take no deal off the table, can I ask the Leader of the House if she has had any thought about introducing electronic voting and dragging us into the 21st century tomorrow night for yet another important vote?
It's a tad ambitious for the honourable gentleman to expect the Leader to facilitate that tomorrow. But he never loses an opportunity. I understand his enthusiasm on that matter, which I rather share, but it's a matter of hot dispute within the House. I mean, the Leader can respond if she wants, but she's not under any obligation, really, to do so. Well, all very, of course.
Well, I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for making me think of every Thursday morning. He raises this frequently with me, and I've always said to him, if the Procedure Committee wanted to come forward with an appraisal of electronic voting with huge support from around the House, then of course I'll always be delighted to consider it.
Thank you. Point of order, Stuart Malcolm MacDonald.
Mr. Speaker, during the exchange earlier, you asked if I was indignant or flummoxed. I think the phrase I prefer to use is that I am bent out of shape with what has gone on here this evening. My question to the Leader was nothing to do with procedure, which you tried to help me with. My question was actually, is there anything to prevent the Leader, in advance of publication of the motion, which you tell us is amendable and rightly so, from telling the House what extension the government has on offer? Because you know, I know, she knows, we all know, that no deal will be ruled out substantially tomorrow night, and this motion will have to come forward. She's probably sat there with this information in her substantial notes. I don't think she's that much out of the loop in government just yet, that she will know what the extension might be. So how can members find this out so that we can be best prepared for tomorrow's debate and best furnished going into Thursday or Wednesday night, where we're going to be running around with napkins with scribbled down amendments to a government motion to hand in to you by 10:30 or whatever time it might be on Thursday morning? How do we prevent that from happening and the government can at once be open with this?
Well, I mean, it is a point of order to the Chair. To be fair to the honourable gentleman, and I hope this can be dealt with in a genial spirit, the honourable gentleman is not one of those who suffers from a concern that having made a point once, it would be excessive to repeat it. On the contrary, he is an experienced campaigner. I must say to the honourable gentleman, I was taught by the right honourable gentleman member for New Forest East 30 years ago that quantity, persistence and above all repetition are as important as the quality of your arguments. Your arguments have to pass muster, but it's a great mistake to think you can just make a point once, persuade someone that you're right and he or she is wrong, and that's the end of it. In fact, you have to keep going over and over again. Now, the honourable gentleman made his point in the form of an inquiry once, wasn't satisfied with the perfectly procedurally legitimate reply that he got from the leader, and therefore he waited several minutes before repeating in a slightly fuller and extremely eloquent form his own preoccupation. And he has done that. But I don't think he's going to get, to be fair, any further answer tonight. The leader said what she said, and I think we'll have to leave it there for tonight. But do I expect the honourable gentleman to be in his place tomorrow, eager to favour the House with his views, leaping from his feet with alacrity? Well, that is as predictable as the passage of the seasons. Oh, very well. I will indulge him very briefly. No, says his party colleague. But I'll indulge him. Point of order, Mr. Stuart Malcolm MacDonald.
I'm most flattered by all of that, Mr. Speaker, but it doesn't actually answer my question, which was to you this time. Is there anything to prevent the leader, in advance of the motion being published, from telling us what its contents might be?
Quite possibly the fact that she does not wish at this stage to do so. And I can think of another reason, and that is that the precise terms of that motion for Thursday, particularly as it is contingent upon what happens tomorrow, will not yet have been crafted.
Right. No, come on.
I mean, the leader doesn't need my help, but I'm just saving her the hassle of getting to the box.
Grateful, Mr. Speaker.
I'm genuinely trying to be helpful. It seems to me entirely reasonable not to have the wording yet, but there we go. Anyway, she says she's grateful, and I'll take her at her word. Yeah, very well. Point of order, Mr. Beatwisher.
The Leader of the House has continually and consistently said that the default position of the EU withdrawal bill is to leave with no deal. That is a position. I think everybody in the House agrees with that. But if there is a vote tomorrow, the House votes overwhelmingly to take no deal off the table. The way to overturn that is for legislation to be introduced. Am I right in that understanding, Mr. Speaker, that legislation will be required in order to turn over the requirements of the Withdrawal Act? And is there any indication that that legislation will be forthcoming if the House votes to take no deal off the table?
Well, the honourable gentleman is getting into hypotheticals, which was deprecated by the leader, or at any rate resisted. And the answer is that I don't dissent from what the honourable gentleman says about the legal position. I don't dissent from that, but we are not at that point yet, and therefore I'm reluctant to introduce new words into this exchange which are not required at this time. I'm not disagreeing with him. I entirely understand the logic of what he's saying, but we're not at that point yet. And the honourable gentleman will be in his place on subsequent days, and I'm sure he'll give full voice to his conviction on this matter. And I dare say others will too, on either side of that argument. I think it would be seemly now if we drew points of order to a close. And specifically, we come now to a series of motions. I think I will, because there is a slight uncertainty as to exactly what might or might not be objected to. I do suggest that I should take them separately. Motion number 4, exiting the European Union, wildlife, whip to move.
Aye.
Thank you. The question is, as on the order papers, most of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Motion number 5 on employment tribunals, whip to move. Thank you. The question is, as on the order papers, most of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Motion number 6, terms and conditions of employment, whip to move.
I beg to move.
The question is, as on the order papers, most of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Motion number 7 on employment agencies, the whip to move.
I beg to move.
Thank you. The question is, as on the order papers, most of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Motion number 8, exiting the European Union, brackets, financial services and markets, close brackets, whip to move.
I beg to move.
Thank you. The question is, as on the order papers, most of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Motion number 9, also as colleagues know, and I'm merely reminding them, on the subject entitled exiting the European Union, brackets, financial services and markets, close brackets, whip to move.
I beg to move.
Thank you. The question is, as on the order papers, most of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Motion number 10, exiting the European Union, brackets, road traffic, close brackets, whip to move.
I beg to move.
Thank you. The question is, as on the order papers, most of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Motion number 11, exiting the European Union, brackets immigration, close brackets, whip to move.
I beg to move.
Thank you. The question is as on the order papers. Members of the opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no.
No.
No. No. The order, the division is deferred until tomorrow. Thank you. Motion number 12, exiting the European Union, brackets financial services, close brackets, whip to move.
I beg to move.
Thank you. The question is as on the order papers. Members of the opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. Petition. John McNally.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to declare my membership of the Hair Council and as a salon owner and also as a state-registered senior barber. The Hairdressers Registration Act of 1964 established a voluntary statutory UK register for qualified hairdressers maintained by the Hair Council, which was set up in 1964 under the Act. The necessity of amending the Act in order to make registration mandatory has been addressed several times in the House since that time. However, the need for this to become a requirement has never been as crucial as it is now. Regulation too for the barber and beauty industries is equally essential and of the utmost importance. Therefore, Madam Deputy Speaker, I rise to present this petition of residents of the UK. The petition of residents of the United Kingdom declares that, based upon recent research from industry, stakeholders and the general public, upwards of 84% average of all responders, there is a strong need and desire to amend this Act of Parliament from voluntary to that of mandatory. Further, that currently the hair, barber and beauty industries are completely unregulated, which the public and industry find totally unacceptable and not in line with protecting the public from untrained and unqualified practitioners, including cases of poor health, safety and hygiene standards. Further, that with the current modern-day slavery issues, together with the use of precursor chemicals used in the making of incendiary devices, by giving the industry the tools to self-regulate, we can make a huge contribution to challenging and stamping out these illegal and dangerous practices. The petitioners therefore request that the House of Commons urge the Government to amend this Act of Parliament to that of mandatory, whilst including beauty into the Act, the body of the Act, thus allowing industry to self-regulate with the remit to raise the standards of quality and training within the industry, whilst also raising the perception of the industry with the general public and protecting them from any form of malpractice. The petitioners further request that the Hair and Barber Council be consulted when amending this Act, and the petitioners remain, etc.
Mr. John McNally.
Here, here.
Thank you. Petition: the regulation of the hair, barber and beauty industries.
Thank you.
Petition Mr. William Ragg.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We now come to the important business of the day, and I rise to present a petition about the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework and, in particular, the Romiley Greenbelt. Since its publication in 2016, I have consistently urged that the overall number of houses needs to be reduced, and that where houses are to be built, we should follow a robust brownfield-first strategy, and that the local greenbelt land, which is highly valued by local people, should be protected. One such site of particular concern in my constituency is the proposal for Hyde Bank Meadows in Romiley. It comprises a well-used community.
blanket. It's a great idea. Sit down. She uses it.